Picture this, the most debonair man in Hollywood history, standing in front of a mirror, practicing his accent for hours, desperately trying to erase who he really was. What if I told you that Cary Grant, the epitome of charm, sophistication, and old Hollywood glamour, was living a lie so elaborate that even he forgot who he truly was? Welcome back to Behind the Fame, where we uncover the stories Hollywood tried to bury. Today, we're diving into the shocking reality behind one of cinema's greatest icons. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never look at Cary Grant the same way again. Born Archibald Leach in 1904 in the grimy industrial town of Bristol, England, the future Cary Grant grew up in poverty that would haunt him forever. His father, Elias, was a struggling tailor with a drinking problem. His mother, Elsie, well, that's where our story takes its first dark turn. When Archie was just 10 years old, his father told him his mother had gone away on a long trip. The truth? She'd been committed to a mental institution against her will, and his father never planned to tell him. Can you imagine being 10 years old and believing your mother abandoned you? This lie would shape everything about the man who became Cary Grant. He spent years thinking she was dead, carrying that abandonment like a stone in his chest. The working-class Bristol accent, the name Archibald Leach, his entire identity. Everything reminded him of loss and shame. At 14, desperate to escape, he joined a traveling acrobatic troupe. Picture this skinny kid from Bristol, performing death-defying stunts, literally running away to join the circus. But even then, he was already studying people, watching how they moved, how they spoke, how they commanded attention. He was learning to become someone else entirely. When young Archie arrived in New York in the 1920s, he was just another broke performer with dreams. But here's where the transformation begins, and it's more disturbing than you think. He didn't just change his name from Archibald Leach to Cary Grant. He systematically erased every trace of who he was. The Bristol accent? Gone, replaced by a carefully crafted mid-Atlantic drawl that sounded sophisticated but belonged to no real place. His mannerisms? Studied from other actors until they became second nature. Even his famous charm wasn't natural. It was a performance he perfected through obsessive practice. Friends later described walking into his apartment and finding him in front of mirrors, rehearsing conversations, practicing facial expressions, becoming Cary Grant. But here's the twisted part. Hollywood loved it. The studios saw this malleable young man who would do anything to succeed, and they molded him into their perfect leading man. They controlled everything, his relationships, his public appearances, even his private life. Cary Grant wasn't just an actor. He was a carefully constructed product. And the women? Oh, the legendary romances that made headlines? Most were studio arrangements. The real Cary Grant was struggling with his identity in ways that 1930s Hollywood could never understand or accept. He was experimenting with LSD therapy decades before it was mainstream, desperately trying to find himself under all those layers of performance. He was married 5 times, each relationship crumbling because nobody could love a man who didn't know who he was. The breaking point came in 1962, during what should have been the peak of his career. Picture this, Cary Grant, now 58, the epitome of Hollywood success, sitting in a psychiatrist's office, taking LSD under medical supervision, sobbing uncontrollably as he finally confronted the truth about his mother. You see, it wasn't until he was in his 50s that he discovered his mother was still alive. Still alive? His father had lied for decades. She'd been in that institution all along, forgotten, abandoned, while her son became one of the most famous men in the world. When Cary finally found her, she was in her 80s, and she didn't even recognize the sophisticated movie star standing before her. She only knew Archie, the little boy who used to help her in the kitchen. This revelation shattered him. Everything he'd built, every persona he'd created, every relationship he'd destroyed, all of it was based on a lie about abandonment that was itself a lie. The LSD sessions that followed were his desperate attempt to strip away the layers of Cary Grant and find Archie Leach underneath. His therapist described him as a man at war with himself. He would arrive at sessions as the polished movie star and leave as a confused, frightened man who couldn't remember what his real laugh sounded like. The most heartbreaking part? He started carrying a photo of his mother everywhere, trying to remember her face, trying to remember love before it became performance. What happened next was unprecedented in Hollywood. At the height of his fame, Cary Grant made a decision that shocked everyone. He walked away. Not gradually, not for a break. He simply stopped. His last film was Walk, Don't Run in 1966, and then silence. The most bankable star in Hollywood chose to disappear. But this wasn't retirement as we know it. This was a man desperately trying to become real. He moved away from the Hollywood machine, reduced his public appearances, and began what he called my real education. He continued his LSD therapy, despite the controversy and legal risks. He started traveling, not as Cary Grant the movie star, but as a man trying to understand who he was without the cameras. He began reaching out to people from his past, not Hollywood connections, but people who knew Archie Leach. He tracked down childhood friends from Bristol, members of the old acrobatic troupe. He was literally trying to piece together his authentic self from fragments of memory and old relationships. The most telling change? He started speaking differently. Not the manufactured mid-Atlantic accent, but something closer to his original Bristol dialect mixed with his American experience. People who met him in those later years described him as warmer, more genuine, but also more fragile. The armor of Cary Grant was cracking, and underneath was a vulnerable man who'd spent 40 years pretending to be someone else. Here's the tragedy and the triumph of Cary Grant's story. He spent his final decades trying to integrate the two sides of himself, the polished performer and the abandoned boy from Bristol. His fifth marriage, to Barbara Harris, was different from the others. She was 33 years younger, but their relationship was built on something his previous marriages lacked: honesty about who he really was. For the first time, he wasn't performing. He told her about Archie, about his mother, about the fear and shame he'd carried for decades. Their daughter Jennifer, born when he was 62, became his chance to break the cycle. He was determined to be present, real, nothing like his own absent father. But the scars ran deep. Even in his 70s, friends described him as a man still searching for himself. He would sometimes catch his reflection and seem surprised, as if he'd forgotten which version of himself he was supposed to be. He gave rare interviews where he spoke honestly about his struggles with identity, his regrets about the relationships he'd sacrificed on the altar of image. The LSD therapy continued sporadically throughout his life. He credited it with helping him access emotions he'd buried under decades of performance. But it also left him questioning everything, every memory, every relationship, every moment of his carefully constructed life. He once told a reporter, "I've spent so many years becoming Cary Grant that I forgot how to be Archie Leach. Now I'm too old to be either one completely." When he died in 1986, at age 82, he was preparing for a one-man show called A Conversation with Cary Grant. It was going to be different from his usual appearances, more honest, more vulnerable. He wanted to tell his real story, not the Hollywood version. He never got the chance. His estate revealed something fascinating. He'd kept journals throughout his life, written in two different handwriting styles. One was the elegant script of Cary Grant, the movie star. The other was messier, more emotional, the handwriting of Archie Leach, the boy who never stopped grieving his mother. The dark truth about Cary Grant isn't scandal or crime. It's something more universal and heartbreaking. It's the story of a man who became so successful at being someone else that he lost himself entirely. In a way, he was Hollywood's perfect creation, a person willing to sacrifice authenticity for image, love for success, truth for the dream. But here's what makes his story ultimately powerful: his later attempts to find himself, to integrate his fractured identity, to choose vulnerability over performance. In the end, Cary Grant's greatest role wasn't in any movie. It was learning to be human again. So the next time you watch North by Northwest or An Affair to Remember, remember, you're not just watching Cary Grant. You're watching Archibald Leach's greatest performance, a man so committed to the role that he almost forgot it was a role at all. What's the lesson here? Maybe it's that the price of perfection is often our authenticity. Maybe it's that the images we craft can become prisons we never escape. Or maybe it's that it's never too late to search for who we really are, even if we've spent decades being someone else. What do you think? Was Cary Grant a victim of the Hollywood system, or did he make choices that ultimately cost him his identity? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story opened your eyes to the real cost of fame, hit that like button and subscribe to Behind the Fame for more untold stories about the icons who shaped our culture. Because sometimes the most important story isn't the one they wanted us to see, it's the one they try to hide. Until next time, remember, behind every perfect image is a human being, complex and flawed and searching for truth. Thanks for watching.